Tom Hiddleston opened up to GQ magazine, but the main part that everyone's talking about within the interview is him opening up and talking about when he wore that tank top, the I Heart TS Taylor Swift tank top when he was in Rhode Island with her on 4th of July weekend. And it's a really interesting article. So it comes out in GQ in March. You have to read it because the writer of GQ, she injects her opinion quite a bit within it. And it's very sweet. She says that he's a sweet guy. She actually describes him as over-enthusiastic. So when it's anything from bolognese to oatmeal to actors, everything is, wow, great, amazing. But then when the Taylor Swift part with the tank top gets brought up, he would not stop talking about it. And those were her words. So we'll get into it. So first, when they started talking about T Swift and the tank top, he says this in the magazine, quote, and here he puts, so you're gonna hear her thoughts too, and here he puts down his fork, a bite of my steak still on it. He looks off into the middle distance, and here's what he says. I feel like you could say it so much better, Brett. I feel like you could say it so much, so you're gonna just read from that quote down, okay? In his voice.
The truth is, it was the 4th of July and a public holiday, and we were playing a game, and I slipped and hurt my back. And I wanted to protect the greys from the sun and said, does anyone have a t-shirt? And one of her friends said, I've got this. The friend pulled out the I Heart TS tank top and that Taylor's friends are contractually obligated to own. And we all laughed about it. It was a joke.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, so what's interesting though is after that, he kept going on and on about it, according to the GQ writer. She says this in the article. He still isn't looking at me. The last piece of my steak is now poised on his fork in midair. He is so sad and I can't take it anymore. So I put my hand on his and I say, Tom, it's okay. You don't have to talk about the tank top anymore. I got it. I understand. I'll tell the world, but he can't stop talking about it. He literally cannot stop talking about it. That's in the article. Then she goes on to say that within the interview, they had 3 or 4 different meeting spots. So first they went on a long walk in a park and then in London, and then the next day he wanted to talk more, so they went to another park. Then he invited her to his apartment, and then the morning she was leaving to go check out and go fly away back home, he was like, I still need to set the record straight. So she went over there one more time. He wanted to continue to talk about the relationship and let people know this. So first of all, it was real, okay, because there was a lot of speculation that it wasn't real. And that also, quote, he says, Taylor is an amazing woman. She's generous and kind and lovely, and we had the best time. I only know the woman I met. She's incredible. Brett should have read that, but it's fine. Let's get through this. And then finally, because according to sources, it was because Taylor wanted to keep everything private, and he wanted to, he's very public. That's his personality. And so he says, you have to fight for love. You can't live in fear of what people might say. You have to be true to yourself. I'm not going to live my life in hiding. So he didn't like hiding the relationship, according to the article. Thoughts, 5 words or less?
I still have many questions.
Yes.
Tanks a lot for nothing.
Uh-huh.
A well-tailored response.
Yes. When talking not so swift, he goes, you remember his Golden Globe speech. He goes on and on and on. This is crazy to me.
I think it's
he's
just
the one
how
who
he
did that
is.
speech.
Yes!
It was like, I'm really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, in humanitarian speech.
And it took forever.
What a fart.
I was waiting for it there to
Forgot
be.
about that.
Yes, it's the same guy. This is him.
And it is the same guy. That's what I got from the interview, and I know that we're going to talk about the Hiddle-Swift relationship, but from the interview as a whole, it kind of allowed me to see that I think that's just kind of how he is, for better or for worse. I don't think it's an act. I don't think that it's sort of a publicity, contrived personality. Yeah. I think it's just how he expresses himself, and it's a little bit cringeworthy, and some of it you don't know, especially reading it through. The interviewer does a good job of sort of inserting herself and narrating it, but still is unclear what is a joke and what is not, or like what the tone of some things were. Because when he says her friends are contractually obligated, I was like, wait, is that, because it could be true. Like, what if you are now going to be hanging out with Taylor Swift and here is a tank top? You are
I think that is a joke.
I think he made a joke. Yeah.
But like, I need to know that it was a joke, because he also says other things here and there where I'm like, was it the bolognese recipe? Like, is there a little joke in there? Is it sort of like a little slight? I don't know.
But the problem is, I think he's so, like, frankly, obsessed with himself, right? Like the way that he was talking about his like bolognese, and he was so focused on the tank because that's what blew up. He just kept wanting to talk about it because that was a time when he was in the media constantly. So I think he was trying to perpetuate that.
You're right, because really quickly to piggyback on that, please read the article. We will include it. We will include the link, because there's a part in the article where he goes on and on to say he was shocked by how much attention it got and people kept talking about it. So he was focused on the attention he received from it rather than just merely explaining it.
It seems like some actors are just very powerful emotion communicators. And that's a great asset to have when an award-winning writer has written the things for you to communicate. But when left to their own devices, some actors are just communicating emotions like, this is the best bolognese ever. And so that's what I think comes across. And probably for her, this was a really refreshing next step to go from her ex-boyfriend to someone who was just so genuinely emotive, from like the guy who was too cool for school to this
Are you talking
guy.
about Taylor Swift?
So Taylor Swift
Okay,
went
yeah, yeah,
from Calvin Harris, other pseudonym, whatever. So from Calvin Harris, who was like, I'm a top, boom, 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 to this guy who's like, you should meet my parents today.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
That's I forgot
They
about
dated
that
for a couple months.
And then
yeah.
it was like, and then they're walking on the beach with his mom, and I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's
Right.
insane.
What are we
That's
doing?
very intense.
He just seems, she described him as very passionate, but he's also very long-winded. And it's like, just get to the point,
Yeah.
bro. And then we saw that in the speech.
We all know actors. Do we know long-winded actors? Like that's what I sort of liked about this interview, is that for a while I thought that maybe he was putting on some sort of a show. At the Golden Globes, you talked about his speech. It sort of felt maybe he was doing this show, or it was a speech
think
that
it's
he
just him.
had.
You're right.
I think
Yeah.
they just don't know what else
and
to
he
do.
reminds me of so many other actors that I've met in LA, where it's again what Brett said, when they're sort of left to their own devices, when they're not contained within a script. It's just sort of like idea, feelings, so much love, zest.
But don't
Hannah?
unlock and get underneath
Well,
that,
that's what
because it's bad.
That's what the article said, is that she was trying to get to her plane and he showed up at her apartment and was just like,
I need to
know
talk
you
more."
are going, but I'm just gonna, he like sulked his head and like, I was like, this is out of control.
It's not
Like,
about you,
this
it
is
is,
not,
but
this
yeah. It
is
is
not
about
a
him,
healthy sort of situation. Like first I was like, okay, she's in love with him. And then he shows up at his apartment. I think the love story is this article. I don't know about like Taylor Swift, like long gone. I think this author.
So,
and him.
question for everyone,
Yes.
having read it now: do you believe what he says in that the relationship with Taylor Swift was totally real, and that it was not an orchestrated publicity stunt, that it was a real, authentic relationship? Because I was very skeptical. I thought we were all getting played, and I said that on this show.
Yeah.
I now think, having read this, I think it was his way, their relationship. I think it was absolutely true, and it was just sort of a combination of two people who attract a lot of attention. And he had, he was a well-respected actor, but he'd never had that sort of, he'd never been tabloid fodder before.
Right.
And I think he sort of liked it in an odd way. I think it was very interesting for him to experience.
Right, he has this category of like really good British actor that comes through and just is in a bunch of movies. Kind of, it would be a leading role, but you don't really take them seriously. Like the guy who's in Masters of Sex. He's like a good,
Michael
utility.
Sheen.
Michael Sheen's a good utility British actor that like, wow, thanks for being on our television shows and in our movies, but like he doesn't ever get that. And this, I don't know, because I remember back when the story broke that they were together, thinking there was that rumor that they were just kind of photographed together incidentally, and he was like, sure, I'll go along with this. But I agree with you.
I think he would have
that now it's
talked
like,
more about it. If it really was false and it was for a publicity stunt, I think he would have focused more on that, trying to prove it wrong, because he just can't help himself.
Yeah.
He just keeps chatting. I mean, he
gave him-
seems like a really nice
I
guy,
know
but
he
I think you're
does.
right. He also seems, even though the article is all about him, he just makes it all about himself. Like, give her a break, dude. This is like 4 days in a row of you like continuing this interview when it should have been one day, one
And
afternoon.
I think he thinks that the tank top is what killed his relationship. The way that they were talking about
Yeah.
that, it sounded like he was like, it was the tank top. No, dude, it wasn't the tank top.
I gave him $1,000 once.
What?
Yeah, when I was
What are
working
you
for Marvel,
talking
I like
about?
licensed. I was like, oh, can we just use this clip from the Avengers? And they were like, yeah. And then I found out later that he got $1,000 from that.
That's
So
awesome.
you owe me, Hiddleston. You owe me money. Split it. Where's my 10%? The juice is running.
True. He owes you $100. He owes you $100. All right, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll see you next time on Pop Sugar.